when I look at faith, it's not just the Bible studies, it's not just the prayers, it's not just all the other things that I do, which they are very important, but it actually, I begin to build that launching pad to get people to the space by building that relationship with them, and building that community space. And you learn, it's almost like when you working out, you're learning to be intentional with what you're doing. Once you become intentional, once you begin to be patient, and once you do become consistent, so you start thinking about how do I build relationships with people, even at the workplace, whereby I don't become just passively going to work, leaving and going home.
Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Up Next. Today, I'm talking with our newest teammate, colleague, Obakeng Motshome. Short for Obi. Obi, good morning good afternoon to you in South Africa.
Yes. Hi, Tommy. Afternoon for me, morning for you. Good to be connecting.
Yeah, as we're sitting here, where is home for you here, Obi?
So I'm originally from the east of Joburg, where our main airport is, or Tambo International. So I'm closer to that east of Johannesburg. And right now I'm more on the central side of Johannesburg. That's more actually northern. I'm close, yeah. I'm in the north of Johannesburg right now. But
Yeah.
we
Hey,
grew up in this 1 hour radius area.
if people who are listening have never been to Joburg before, how would you describe Joburg to them?
I mean, Joburg is like a city of gold. People come through to this city to realize opportunities all the way from being a student, university degree, and those who come through start to build something, whether it's a business or they join people. So yeah, it's almost like the place to make it. That's how Joburg is perceived, and a lot of people from Cape Town, Durban, and all over after finishing university often are in the city. So.
Very good. And so for you, a lot of times, what was it like growing in Joburg, and how has Joburg changed compared to when you were growing up to where it is right now?
Yeah, so for me, I think so. South Africa went through a lot of changes in the 90s, with the whole transition, democracy, Nelson Mandela. But for me, I think I started seeing things more because I was born 91. So after 2005, 6, after being 10 years old, that's kind of like my got starting to see
Yeah.
and understand Johannesburg more. So yeah, it's always had that hustle and bustleness, depending especially on your CBD side or you're on the north side. So I was mostly in Ikuruleni, which is an hour away east of Johannesburg. So that's kind of where I grew up. Yeah, so it had that hustle and bustleness, growing up, and even till this day, it still has that hustle and bustleness of it, of the city. And the nice part is that the whole continent is literally here, because anywhere literally in the part of Johannesburg that you go to, there's people from East Africa, West Africa, Central Africa, and a bit of the north as well.
Yeah. Now, for you, a lot of times, I know we're going to talk a little bit more about your role with Research Global in Johannesburg, but your other side of your job, what do you do for a living?
So yeah, I run a travel business called Afrika Dumela. So yeah, I'm showcasing people South Africa. But it started off with showcasing the whole continent. Then I realized I need to focus on a particular area to go. You know me, guys like me do too much too soon. So you start being like 55 countries, 52 weeks. Let's do this. And then you realize, okay, yeah, I need to slow down. I need to pace myself and so forth. So yeah, the business is Afrika Dumela. So I do Johannesburg, Cape Town, and Safari.
Oh, really? Okay. So if someone, usually is it people from London or other parts of Africa or the West who want to be able to tour South Africa, they're going through you to coordinate everything.
Yes. So I typically would go through like Chamber of Commerce, travel agents, people who already kind of have South Africa on their radar. Someone who's like, man, I've seen this. I want to come see Safari. I want to come see Johannesburg or Cape Town, because I think particularly Johannesburg and Cape Town are doing a lot of work with tourism, so already the world knows about these two cities and people want to come visit, whether it's sports or whatever the case may be, and especially with business opportunities and Cape Town with this whole tech space that's happening down there. So for me, then what I do is, hey man, let me actually set up a trip for you, 6 to 9 days, 3 days in each destination. So it's a different experience when you watch videos of people coming to South Africa compared to
Yeah.
you being there yourself. So that's kind of what I do.
Yeah. If you were there, like for instance, when we think of South Africa, may want to see Nelson Mandela's home or the museum. They may want to do a safari. Cape Town, a lot of times they're so. What would you show them? What are some of the key things in both Cape Town and Johannesburg that people will have to see?
Yeah, no, definitely. Nelson Mandela is such a key figure, and the nice part is that both cities have a story to tell about him, and like for example, Nelson Mandela Home here in Soweto, and us is the Constitutional Hill, whereby where the Constitution was formed. There's actually a prison before, then it turned into a court. And yeah, so for me, it's just those stuff of showing them the Soweto, the history. They get to see the Johannesburg, Sandton cities, and then they get to see the it's this apartheid museum in Johannesburg, and then you go to the Robben Island in Cape Town as well, and then you get to see also geographically how each place is set up. Because a lot of times how geographically the whole geopolitics of it, the place influences politically how things end up happening. And then ultimately you close it off with a safari, because after those 6 days,
Yeah.
you kind of want to see magnificent beasts, just that's just a winner.
Yeah. Now, for you, a lot of times, what's the part of it that you enjoy? Johannesburg, Cape Town, what's the location? What's the place that you personally like that people may not know of?
Oh man, I'm very biased. I'm gonna say Johannesburg. It's like the New York guy when he goes to LA. He loves LA, but New York is still New York. But I think for me, Johannesburg, it's just that place whereby because it is people come to build and you end up being forced to build relationships because you have to
Mm,
depend on people, build relationships, and it becomes communal. As much as some people may feel like it's not, that people are focusing on just making money and leaving. So you end up building relationships more and more. And then yeah, so that's my favorite part in terms of like the relationship community. But obviously the scenic shots, the routes, and just so much to do will be like the Cape Town space, you just get to see the Table Mountains, the ocean. I mean, Cape Town and Joburg, you compare with the ocean. I mean, Johannesburg can't compete because there's no ocean. So, yeah, but I think also the safari, just getting to just pause. You can take pictures with your phone, but ultimately you want to put your phone down and just take it all in. So
yeah,
yeah, so they all have different treats, but I think Johannesburg for me is the biggest winner.
very good. Oh, how did you get this thing started? I mean, what made you? Was it years in the making? Did it happen overnight? Talk to me a little bit about how you started this.
It actually started all the way from 2013, like 11 years ago. So 2013, so I'm in university campus and I'm going through discipleship. And one of the biggest things I started to realize that I want to really, because I had this urge of wanting to grow emotionally as a man because I could see the economical part whereby you go to work, you go to school, then you go to get a job. So now as a man, once economically things are good for you, we assume that everything is okay. And then I decided to go meet up with a couple of mentors, people I'd meet at church, at conferences, community. And then I was just learning, just asking them questions. I was avoiding asking older people for advice because when you ask them for advice, they kind of get far removed and start telling you what young people need to do. But I started asking them questions that knowing what you know now, what you have done differently as a 22-year-old, at that time. And the two biggest things that they would share with me, it's self-awareness, spend a lot of time getting to know yourself more. And secondly was exposure. And I explained to something very powerful. They just told me words I know, but the way they explained it was self-awareness. When you spend more time getting to know yourself better, you're able to solve a lot of problems because you start with yourself first. Secondly was the exposure. Go see places. It doesn't have to be a different country, even if it's a different city within your country. And then yeah, ever since then, 5 years later, I took a couple of friends to Botswana and Gaborone, Botswana, our neighboring country, for a road trip. And then we did it 4-hour drive, turning to 14 hours. It was a bad logistical trip, but at the end, people enjoyed it to a point that one friend of mine was like, Obi, people say they're going to go on a trip, but you actually make it happen. So just that line from him, I was like, wait a minute, I can do this. Then from 2018, I've just been running the business for 6 years now.
Very, very good. Now, when you were in college and when you were growing up, what did you want to do? What did you think you were going to do?
Oh, so I did accounting. I actually have a accounting qualification, but I've never really practiced in accounting. So, but the biggest thing I just really wanted to do, I was those confused people who did a BCom general and just get the
Yeah.
subjects that the people you want to kind of do or focus on something with them, focus on the career that they're going to just get and just keep moving year by year. So I was that guy. I'll just keep moving. I want to do something in finance, but I don't know what. Until then, I started actually building relationships, got into campus ministry, and then eventually later, I'm now in travel. So that's how it happened.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so here you are, a county major, then
Mm.
campus ministry, then your travel business, then also you're doing Resource Global with our young marketplace leaders in Johannesburg.
100%.
As you reflect upon your life, you've gone through different things, different transitions. Uh,
100%.
what has God been teaching you all these years?
I think the biggest lesson I've just been learning throughout each stages that I've been moving at, it's that whole thing of just perseverance is a community project. You know, there's a quote that I heard from a friend at a conference who shared that, and I think there's that thing of like those are the biggest stuff I've been learning because everywhere I've been going, it's always been a community project. Even the business starting it off, getting to put products there, the community that's there, Resource Global now being part of a team because most directors would start a city on their own, but with me coming in already having other people in the same country, just the support structure, you realizing more and more of like all of us pretty much given a skill and an opportunity and support structure is so much we can do, and we often overlook those things.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Very, very good. And how did you know it was time? Like, if someone is sitting there, Obakeng, how do you know when it's time to move on from one thing to another, whether it's campus ministry to your travel? What would you say? When do you know when to make a transition?
Yeah, I think oftentimes I wouldn't be thinking of transitioning while I'm starting. It's only like now, whereby as I'm older, I'm beginning to think of there's this line we'd often use in campus ministry of work yourself out of a job. So now, even as you're working, you want to be having someone to replace you, which ends up creating healthiness of an organization. Whereby when you leave, the ship doesn't sink. So you get to a position where someone comes in, the ship keeps moving. So yeah, so. I think that's the mainly has been opportunities because it's often been like a mentor who was like, man, there's something that they're building that they feel like I can be able to grow in. And then sometimes you feel like, man, I think I've done enough here. There's a season that you feel like, I've been in this place and I've put in the amount of time and effort I could. And I think God is leading me in a different direction. So you get to a position at times to be like, you know what? I think this is the time to actually take this risk and try out this field. So that's how often I've been led to transition.
Yeah, yeah. Switching gears, talking about young marketplace leaders in Johannesburg. Talk to me about those guys. What industries are you dealing with? Is it more tech, entrepreneurial, finance, telecom, nursing? Talk to me about the industry that you find in Johannesburg.
Oh, Johannesburg, it's all of it. There's people who are running businesses, there's people who are in health, there's people who are in law, people who are in finance, and the nice part about how you find people who are convinced that a degree is a career, but not a qualification. So you find people who studied law, who did their masters, but then are working in the health space, developing a tech and an app to be able to get access to health services. So we get people from across the board. And the nice part about it is that there's so many word of mouth marketing that happens to a point that you meet someone who's in law connected to someone who's in the accounting space, economic space, and then mining space. So literally across all the industries you meet them in.
Yeah. Obi, what does when we sit there and talk about this faith and work conversation, all of that, what does that mean to you?
Faith and work conversation. I think it's that example that our country director Sibs often use that when people look at Sunday, they look at Monday. Sunday feels like heaven because the pastor gave you a great sermon. There's people you're connecting with, you're having tea and coffee. And then Monday feels like hell. And then you realize actually these 2 days, why are they complete different and opposite to each other? While actually my life is actually my ministry. How I need to use my life as a ministry so that now even as I'm transitioning from a Sunday to a Monday, how can I use my life as a ministry? So then now you begin to realize actually when I look at faith, it's not just the Bible studies, it's not just the prayers, it's not just all the other things that I do, which they are very important, but it actually, I begin to build that launching pad to get people to the space by building that relationship with them, and building that community space. And you learn, it's almost like when you working out, you're learning to be intentional with what you're doing. Once you become intentional, once you begin to be patient, and once you do become consistent, so you start thinking about how do I build relationships with people, even at the workplace, whereby I don't become just passively going to work, leaving, and going home.
Yeah. And I would probably also add on, Obi, a lot of times, even as we're part of this conversation, is
Yeah.
what is he doing in your life? Because a
Mm.
lot of times he's been in the midst of writing and doing something your life, preparing you for something. You've gone from college where you thought you were in accounting. Was
Yeah.
I going to do accounting? I'm not sure, but let's just do accounting. Then later on,
Mm,
it was switching over to campus ministry. You start
mm,
learn something about yourself in terms of how to invest in people, what it means to grow as a leader, what it means to prepare yourself for one day when you're gone. Then now
sure.
you're starting a travel business. Did you think you were going to start a travel business? No, I didn't think I was going to start a travel business.
No.
It started with just an interest. Now
Sure.
with Resource Global, did you think 5 years ago you were going to do a Resource Global cohort? Probably
Mm,
not. So,
mm,
what is God doing in your life? And when you look back at your life, wow, here is what you were showing me. Here's the lessons that I learned that prepared me for this moment. But that is uniquely your story. And
mm,
somehow now you're interacting with the Chinese guy from America, or you're
mm,
interacting with Adrian from Cluj. You were
mm.
in Turkey with a bunch of folks from Asia, Africa. Wait, Lord, what are you trying to show me through all these different things? But that's the journey that He has us on.
Sure. No, no, definitely.
Yeah.
I think even in light of that, I remember the campus ministry I worked for, Campus Outreach. One of the leaders there would often remind us that every Christian is a missionary. Especially when people are transitioning off. Not feeling like, man, this is my peak as a Christian. I've done the most here, but to be like, no, this is a launching pad. Like literally every single project you do, you want to be launching to something else, to something else, to something else, to something else until the very end. So I think that stuff of always realizing that, man, my life, it's literally me as a missionary. I'm in Johannesburg, I'm in Randburg, I'm doing this travel space, then you're meeting people, then you get this clientele, you're building relationships, you're literally hearing stories, and you're hearing people's stories. You get to look for opportunities to connect further. Some of them might happen, some of them might not happen, but you become intentional. Now you begin to realize that it's almost like when you're building a business, because they say entrepreneurship is like a personal project, personal development disguised as a business, because you're constantly learning more about yourself than you do about the business. And you're always developing. And then now you learn later, when you're able to do stuff quicker, it's because you've invested heavy on yourself than on an industry that you were in.
Yeah, yeah. And then also a lot of times not only learning about that, but also your heart. What is the motivations behind everything that you
Yeah.
do? Those are some of the hard questions that you and I have to ask ourselves, deep
Mm.
questions. Am I really being driven to build God's kingdom for the glory of the gospel? Or is there something driving me? Do I really like it when people say great things about me as Obi? Am I driven by the very fact that, hey, I long for people's appreciation. I long to do something different. I don't know. So what are the things that drive me as well too? Do you feel like folks in Johannesburg understand this faith and work conversation, or is it a brand new concept that you're just now introducing? Or would you say, Tommy, they do understand it? We're going to build on it.
Yeah, I think it's a bit of both. There's people who the people in my circles mostly. Like I got introduced to Resource Global through Christo, my colleague. He Because I worked with him in campus ministry actually 10 years ago. We started together there 10 years ago. So for me, I've never really thought of it as a faith and work ministry, but I knew the faith, I knew that there's work, and I knew you do all things to the glory of God. So as you live a life, but then now starting to wrestle with this concept of be like, actually, how do I live a life whereby I live out by faith in the workplace as a marketplace leader? Because oftentimes people think about ministry to be the 1040 window, the missionary the church sends out, as long as I can send them out, but then to be like, okay, more people, more Christians actually in the workplace than there are on the mission field. How do we
Yeah.
equip the ones in the workplace, and that mission field, what workplace is actually a mission field? So there's a bit of both. Once I got into Resource Global, then I started meeting more people in Johannesburg with more almost like different stages of campus, as different stages of faith and work ministry. Then now you realize actually Resource Global 25 to 35 window, it became a space where a lot of people at 25 and 35 are not thinking a lot about that. So that's kind of whereby we're able to connect with more people.
Yeah. Are you finding, even as you're looking at the cohorts in Johannesburg, or even as you interact with people, is it more women who are interested in this, more men, or a matter of both, or what are you seeing in terms of patterns?
Yeah, I think in general, women are more prone to go to church than men do typically. But I think now men are beginning to think about how important is my spiritual health, to a point that even now when I'm connecting with neighbors or friends, guys talk more about prayer, they're talking about emotional health, they talk about spiritual health, And then now when you get into the spaces of Christians, you find that more, especially when depending on the church's breakdown, you'd find that the pool might lead more to men and women. But in most cases, you find that actually be more women. But now I'm encountering more and more guys, especially with the whole the ones who've been through campus ministry, discipleships. You find more guys actually getting involved in the movement.
Yeah. When it comes to Resource Global or work with marketplace leaders, all this stuff, what is the one barrier? What is the one thing that you feel like you're going to have to deal with in Joburg?
Whew, the one biggest thing to deal with in Joburg when it comes to marketplace, faith and marketplace, that is a big one. I think the biggest challenges about in Johannesburg is that people often see an organization like a Resource Global as a launching pad for them to do what they want to do. You know, almost like to be like Resource Global can connect me to this, but instead of hey man, actually slow down. It's not there to launch you to somewhere else. It's about you checking your heart and be able to live out your life to
Yeah.
glorify God. So that's kind of like the biggest challenge with because when you get people who are doers and innovators, they're constantly on the move. The biggest challenge is slowing them down. To be like, hey, let's slow down, let's grab a coffee, let's grab a meal and talk about it because people are constantly in the move. They're invited to 5, 6 other things that are happening. There's 12 other events that's happening on the very same day. So now getting people to make time for you and build a relationship consistently to a point that actually they'll pause and be like, okay, Tommy, I'll connect with you on a Thursday, you know, because they value the time that you've invested in their relationship. But once you don't go through kind of building those stages, that becomes a challenge and you feel like people are not interested in what you want to do. But it's actually, in fact, you haven't built and put in the work to get to that point.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I feel like a lot of times, OB, is this one thing that my seminary professor taught me. You're always looking ahead. You're always wanting to do something, but you got to stop and reflect and learn how to see what God is doing in your life. If anything, I think I want our cohorts to understand, hey, look, you're going to do great things, and God's going to open up all these different doors and opportunities in you. But let's really be able to look at your life and your journey and where you're going with everything.
No, no, that is so true. I think, and especially when you're working with young people, you know, 20s and 30s, they are constantly on the move doing things. And I think when once you almost going back to that 2013 of self awareness, because people would look for almost like self development stuff. I want to grow, I want to grow, I want to grow, but you realize actually you can't develop something that you're not aware of. You know, self awareness becomes such a big thing before you start developing. And before you can do the self awareness, you need to pause. You know, you need to pause. Like even now, I'm learning to set aside a time just to pause, take walks, and just not starting to look at it as like I'm wasting time, but actually it's a good thing
Yeah.
just to pause and just take a walk. You know, like after this call, later, just in the next 2 hours, I'll just be taking my walk. You know, when you get into a position of just take a walk, reflect, and then you realize actually rest is so important. And then once you begin to rest and you reflect, you realize actually, man, I need this more and I need to do more of it, you know, because we're quick to develop, but not to do the self awareness, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Obi, if you look upon Joburg, what is it that excites you, that encourages you about the city of Johannesburg? What is a area of concern that you have a burden for and you have a heart for in Joburg?
Sure. I think the area that excites me, it's just the optimism, you know, like even in the challenges that people are seeing across the city, there's this optimism of like, you know what, we'll just be resilient, we'll just keep soldiering through, we'll keep building. Yes, we'll hold the government accountable, we'll be able to push business owners to be able to develop the community. You know, there's that optimism that you're seeing around people that they have about Johannesburg, and people often won't sit there and be pessimistic and be like, you know what, this is it, I'm done with the city. So there's the optimism side of it. And I think the concern often is greed, you know. So people would accumulate money and then they wouldn't sit down and ask themselves a question, how much is enough? You know? And once you sit there, you don't ask yourself how much is enough, you begin to feel like, okay, as long as I give 10% here, 10% here, 10% there, but then you realize actually I can live off 30%, you know, because that's how much of money sometimes some people would be making. And then now to be like, that becomes a concern of greed. And then you begin to feel like, you know what, the people who invest in NGOs are international people, not me. But you're like, no, I need to begin to take my resources and invest it in my community and the same way people do in other parts of the world. So I think the greed part is the concern I see.
Yeah, yeah, very good. You were with the team over in Turkey a couple months ago. Uh,
Yes.
it's probably your first time over in Turkey, and you got a chance to see all the seven churches of Revelations.
Yeah.
What does it mean for someone who's in the travel business to be there and to be amongst different people from different countries as you learn and hear different people learn how to preach and teach and all this stuff? What was that experience like? What did you learn from that time?
No, it was actually amazing because one of our leaders, Donna and Jackson. So I was actually chatting to them about it, because now I was the client who's receiving the tour guide. Guys, we're leaving at this time, going through this. So that's actually great just to be on the receiving end compared to me doing the tours and moving people around. But I think the biggest part I think I've learned, it's just that the whole thing of it's one thing when you're reading scripture and you're in chapter 3 or chapter 4, then after a couple of years they move to this part. A couple of years, why did it take them that long? And then you realize later when you're there, you're like, oh, I see why it actually took them that long to get to that point, because literally understanding geographically how things were set up, and also seeing that Turkey is right in the middle of Asia and Europe, and geographically by nature it becomes a strategic place, just by nature of it being there, the geopolitics of the place. But I think also even the biggest thing is, especially when people are giving teachings, one of the things I loved about, because we did like people would give a talk and then eventually give a feedback right there on the spot. And the nice part about it, the biggest thing that people always point out is to be like, point us to scripture and let us find it in scripture. And it wasn't about the organization, it wasn't about the city, it wasn't about all these other things that are exciting. But people left there convinced and constantly encouraged to be like, okay, I need to go back to this verse, I need to go back to the scripture. And even the one lady even made this example about breaking down two columns of child of God and an orphan. And one of the biggest things about these two, one is anxious, the other one has peace. So yeah, so there's just so much to learn and just so much notes and just stuff to reflect on.
Very, very good. Obi, thank you. As we start wrapping up our conversation here, what's your Christmas plans? What are some of the things that you're hoping to do in Johannesburg during the Christmas season?
Yeah, so for me, my tours typically happen between like a Feb to November, and then I normally what the December and Jan is usually like a big rush for people, and typically I spend that time almost like working on reflection time, writing down time, like even now wrapping up a lot of final interviews with Resource Global and just sorting out the placements for next year, all the way for the next week or so. And then after that, just visiting friends and family. I think people who are around the city, because there's some people who are not leaving the city who will be around, just to be able to connect with them, and just to be able to have a sit down and visit my parents as well. They're just an hour away, so getting to spend time with
Yeah.
them.
All right, a couple fast questions I'm going to ask you. Fun questions for people to get to know you a little bit. Number
Sure.
one, when they visit Joburg, what is a type of food or a restaurant that they need to go to over in Joburg?
Woo, the restaurant we need to check out. So one of my favorite dishes is a kota, quarter loaf of bread with some good stuff in it. So there's an Alex one, there's a Soweto one. So Alex is called Siga Culinary to check it out. Then there's a one called Chili Pepper in Soweto. So that's the spot to check out.
Yeah. When they first land in Johannesburg, what is the first place they're going to bring a group to go see?
Ooh, first place you're gonna take the people to go see. Oh no, definitely I'll take them to. There's quite a few, but I'll take them to Braamfontein. Braamfontein, that's where I studied actually. Wits University campus is there. So the Constitutional Court is there. The Wits University campus is there, and also just getting to see the farmers market in the city. So it's one of the nice spots actually to check out.
What is one place that you're going to bring people to that is not a tourist spot? It won't appear on any Yelp reviews or travel advisor, but you're sitting there. That is Johannesburg. What would it be?
Oh man, I think one of the stuff it goes back to the dish I just mentioned in the beginning. The parts of East Bank in Alex and the Deep Kloof in Soweto, because it's not tourist. I remember I with Sarah and Kevin and a couple of Sarah and Kevin, whereby we went to go there. It was so local centered, because when you're there, the stuff that you order, and then after that, immediately went to Vilagazi Street, right on the other side of Soweto. That was touristy. For me, those two areas will be such good places to check out.
You got it. You got it. And then also, where can people find more information about you? Instagram, LinkedIn, more about your travel business if they're interested in visiting with you?
Yes, 100%. I'm on LinkedIn, Obakeng Motshome on LinkedIn, and also on Instagram. We're there, both the business, Afrika Dumela, right here, and myself, we're there. And yeah, those are the two places you can find us on LinkedIn and Instagram.
Thank you very much, Obi. I appreciate you taking time out to talk.
No, sure thing. Thanks for the chat. I enjoyed it.
Talk soon.
All right. Cheers, Tommy.